Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to all the incredible educators joining us for this Glow session presented by SAR Education. I'm Gitika Sharma, your moderator for this session, and I'm thrilled to host this space where we come together to grow and learn together. Before we begin, let's quickly review our session norms. Please keep your microphones on mute unless you're invited to speak. We encourage you to keep your camera on so that this session is more interactive. Feel free to put your thoughts, your questions, your comments in the chat box throughout the session. We will have a question and answer segment at the end, so do note down your questions. And if you face any technical problem, ping us in the chat box. We are here to help you. Now, we are honored to welcome Miss Lisa Matthews joining us from Even More Education Publishers in the United States. She brings over 2 decades of expertise in educational publishing with deep knowledge of K to 8 classrooms. Today's session is titled Growing Early Learners Through STEM and STEAM Activities. You will discover how to boost problem solving skills through hands on activities that turn basic curriculum skills into real world learning adventures. So let's give a warm virtual welcome to Lisa. Over to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We can dive right in. I will share my screen. Please tell me if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we are.
Great. All right. As this kind friend of mine said, I'm from Evan Moore Educational Publishers. We have been very interested and active in discovering STEM and STEAM in early childhood education. And I'd love to share with you what we've discovered and provide some insights into how you can make STEM and STEAM activities meaningful, actionable in your classroom. So first, we'll look at the role of STEAM and STEM in early education. So I'll give you a moment to look at the slide here. STEAM and STEM, this is all about inquiry-based learning, about discovery, experimentation, purposeful play, exploration. So, and we'll wrap our arms around how we can tie that to your basic skills that you're already teaching your kids and how you can weave that in and really teach a generation of young problem solvers. That's one of our goals in STEM and STEAM. So I'd like to hear from you off the top of your head. If you could name one word that comes to mind when you think of STEM and STEAM activities and put it in the chat. And Gitika, if you could help us by letting us know what some of the input is from the chat. One word that comes to mind when you think of STEM and STEAM activities.
So we have technology, experiments, science, multisensory, robotics, problem solving, collaboration of subjects, applying the learned concept, hands-on
Mm,
activity, art,
yeah,
interdisciplinary. So yeah, maths, these kinds of concepts are being repeated in the chat.
great. Great. Thank you so much for that
But
feedback.
essential skills too.
So exactly, you guys said it. So STEM and STEAM, they are about creativity, both hands and minds. And that's a really important part of this is flexible thinking, creative thinking. this is something that you are instilling at the earliest ages of their education to raise flexible thinkers. STEM and STEAM projects and activities really help you do that. And as you know, hands-on learning. So when kids are creating and producing something, the learning becomes more meaningful to them, right? So you've got active, engaged learners, not passive learners. And that's one of really the main benefits of having a STEAM classroom and having young learners take ownership. And that's really what they'll start to expect from their education and become more invested in what they're learning and what they're doing. Um, STEM and STEAM are about solving real world problems. Now, just because we've got young learners doesn't mean that they can't solve big problems, but we can big and small problems, right? So you can solve a small problem of, there's not enough, the bees on this planet, the numbers are dropping, and how can we turn a shoebox into a place that bees can live and grow? That's maybe a small project, but a big problem, right? So you're starting them early on, really having that global thinking about Earth and what it needs, how they fit in, and really empowering them to provide solutions for those big problems. You can also have a small problem, like the birds around your home don't have enough food in the winter. And what can they do about that? STEM and STEAM, as you know, it's also about collaboration and communication. And aren't those really the skills that take us all through our academic journey and also into our careers? Um, in any career that you're in, you for sure need communication, and you most likely are going to need some level of collaboration. So we're growing young learners to develop their social skills, their ability to work with others, and all the while, you're really boosting their language development. Another off the top of your head, what question did a student ask you that surprised you? Katika, could you?
Yes, I'll read. So you can put your questions in the chat box. The question is, what question did a student ask you that surprised you? I'm sure there are many.
One question that a student asked me that surprised me is when I turn on the light, how did the light switch get to the light? How does it know when I turn on that light switch? How does it know which light in the house to turn on?
That's
So I thought that was a question where they were thinking deeply, right? Just not taking for granted that they're turning on a light switch. So
right.
really thinking deeply about how does that work? And that is an opportunity for a STEM or STEAM or that design thinking that we're going to talk about. And
Yeah. So we
anyone
have,
else?
yeah, we have when they ask how birds fly, and someone is saying, can centrifugal force be used to create a force greater than gravity? That's a
Whoa.
very
How old was that student?
Yes. So Priyanka ma'am, can you share how old was that student? Why we inhale only oxygen?
Hmm,
How
good
does the
one.
sun know when to rise?
My goodness. These are great questions.
And somebody asked why during summer vacation it does not rain.
Okay.
Also,
All
a class
right.
a student asked if robots learn everything, will they also need to go to school?
I love it. Oh gosh, great questions. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at, I know some of you submitted questions before the session as well. And looking at how to turn STEM activities into real learning outcomes. So that's something that we'll talk about in this session. Um, and we'll take a look at just, at the broad strokes. Um, these are the type of developmental skills that you can build through STEM and STEAM activities. So you're looking at cognitive development. I'm sure purposeful play already has a place in your classroom. This is purposeful play that is meaningful and solution based. And that's something that's kind of this evolution that's happened from the purposeful play that we all value, but this has even made it more complex and meaningful. Um, Language development. Gosh, there's so much connected to language development, new vocabulary, explaining your thinking, asking questions. STEM and STEAM provide opportunities for all of the students to think deeply and for teachers to help facilitate how can they express those thoughts. And I think having a project is what gives children the opportunity to really develop that vocabulary. Fine motor skills. We're all trying to build fine motor skills for a variety of reasons, and hands-on projects are one of the best ways to do it. Social development. This is so important. Their social development, children's ability to collaborate, to communicate, to share, to have flexible thinking, accepting other people's ideas, listening, having high quality interactions. STEM and STEAM really provide the environment for all of this to happen. Visual and spatial awareness. This is something we might not always remember, but this is really important for innovative thinking by integrating artistic design and storytelling. Any questions or comments about um, developmental skills and STEAM or STEM? Okay, I'll go to the next slide. So building foundational skills through STEM and STEAM. So this is something that, obviously what STEM and STEAM stands for. This is something that you're weaving all through the curriculum, right? So very much project-based learning, cross-curricular learning. Um, what's really important to know about when you're having your students engage in a STEM and STEAM project is that all of this naturally happens. You're really just highlighting it for them. You're pulling out those threads for them because this is already naturally happening. There's, science in the project. Even at the most basic levels, there might be an element of physical science to the project, where they're building how are the materials, how are the craft sticks sticking to the Play-Doh? So that's even just in what they're doing, you're really able to see what's the technology, right? Why did they choose to put the craft sticks in the Play-Doh? What is their technology behind that, right? And it's the adhesion that they can and that how the Play-Doh is going to wrap around that stick. So you're giving language to those things by asking those questions. Tell me more about how you used the Play-Doh to make the craft stick stand up. And that's connected to engineering. What was their design? What is their plan? Math. How many sticks do you think you're going to need to hold up that, birdhouse that you're building with the craft sticks? And of course, art. This is one of my favorite parts of STEAM is the creativity and imagination. There isn't a wrong answer with art. And so that's something I think that will engage students who may not be leaning toward um, academics. Maybe that's not what they feel inspired by or engaged by. STEAM and STEM can really be a great jumping off point for them to embrace learning more. So let's talk a little bit about developing 21st century skills through STEM and STEAM. We've talked about this already, collaboration, communication, adaptability, resilience. That's something we're hearing a lot about these days is resilience, developing children who are resilient. Um, Something you might have also heard about that is really the cornerstone to STEAM, and it's empathy. And when I first learned about STEAM about 10 years ago, um, I was so surprised by that. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not sure if any of you are surprised by it, but if you guys are looking at each other's the chat, maybe you can share if you also were surprised or not. I've come to understand so much because STEM is about problem solving and STEAM is about problem solving that to find solutions, you really have to care about what it is that you're finding the solution for. And in order to do that, you have to have empathy because maybe, the ocean near you isn't dirty at all. So why should you care about how you're going to solve all the trash in the ocean, right? But if you have empathy for maybe people who are living near an ocean that does not have clean water, then you will care more about that solution. And it's not just about your own thinking, it's truly about helping the people who need that solution, right? That's why empathy is so important. And we're going to talk about where that falls in the design process. And cooperation and teamwork. Um, at the early learning level, it's okay to have a lot of independence in a STEM and STEAM project. It's okay. The kids, for them to build their own birdhouse, they don't necessarily need to collaborate to do that. What they can do is share their plan before they do it so they can communicate about what they were thinking and maybe learn something from what someone else is thinking. It's also okay for them to work together, but you might, as you're bringing STEM and STEAM into your classroom, you might consider starting a few independent projects where kids are just working on their own and then they're joining together with groups because they need to learn their own abilities and get a little confidence in their own skills so that then they can work as a group to maybe work on a larger project. Was anyone else surprised that empathy was like a cornerstone to this learning? Because they didn't give it a letter. They gave everything else that was important a letter, but they didn't give empathy a letter in this. So was anyone else surprised by that?
Yes, so audience is writing that they were. Even I was when you started telling us the problem in the beginning, and the problem you started with was actually related to empathy, that you're thinking about animals, you're thinking about birds and bees.
Yes. All right. So engineering design process. And I'll keep, we've looked at a lot of words on the screen and we'll start looking at some pictures soon. But I wanted to just touch on this. An engineering design process. This is the structure for STEAM and STEM. It's a series of steps that the children are going to follow to engage in STEM and STEAM activities and find a solution to the problem. So we'll look at what the steps include. I have several graphics, but just to go through definition of the problem, thinking about solutions for the problem, building something to solve the problem, testing it, and then improving on what you built. That's the simple design process. And it is what engineers that are making a career of this do. This is the process they use. So we're teaching the very youngest learners design thinking. Okay. So here's some frameworks, a couple graphics. These can be student facing. Okay, you can use these graphics and make them large and put them at your STEM or STEAM center. Of course, as you go through this with all of your different STEM and STEAM activities that you're going to do, this is always something you want to come back to. You always want to review. And in STEAM and STEM education, um, it's a little bit different from maybe regular classroom instruction because teacher becomes facilitator. So you're guiding them through this process and reminding them about what the different steps are that they're going to take. But there's some autonomy here for them. You're facilitating their questions, right? They're formulating them. So you start with asking a question. So what's the problem? Defining the problem. And then brainstorm. This is really fun in an early learning classroom to brainstorm with students about ways to solve the problem. It's very important for the teachers to have a growth mindset. There's no moderating or that should be taking place in brainstorming. There's no response from a teacher that's like, well, no, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. No, it's just whatever ideas, whatever they're imagining, that sounds like an interesting idea. Let's think more about how you can make that work. What does that look like that from our building materials that we have? Can you think of other ideas that you can use these building materials for? So we're not monitoring where their imaginations are taking them. This is all just kind of a free for all. They can come up with whatever they want to. The next step is where you can help them make it more concrete. And that's when we get to the plan, where they're going to draw it and make their materials list. And so if they've come up with an idea that they're really not able to execute on, we can help guide them to come with, is there anything in that plan that you came up with that we can do? So can we think of a second plan that you can use some of your ideas with the materials that we have here or that you can draw a picture of? So next step is planning phase. Then we go on to creating. And one of the best things about STEM and STEAM is, well, for the STEM and STEAM projects that I'll be showing you, um, you don't need a lot of special materials to do them in the early learning classroom. You can use materials from your household, your school site, and we'll go into what some of those materials are. So, and obviously, if you're getting into robotics with STEM and STEAM, then that does require special materials. Um, Next phase is to test. So usually with STEM and STEAM, you will have some qualifiers that you're giving to the kids. So, they have a goal that whatever, if they're building a boat out of using only wood materials and glue, their goal would be that the boat would float and then they would test it. What's very important in STEM and STEAM is the next step, which is improving. So part of design thinking incorporates failure. And failure might appear to be like maybe as adults, we have a negative connotation with that word, but there is not a negative connotation with failure in STEAM. It is just as valuable as success. So that's really the growth mindset that we need teachers who are bringing STEM and STEAM into their classrooms to have. And that is I say that, very seriously because it is truly a very important part of STEM and STEAM. It is part of the process to test and to say, oh, that didn't work. That's really how you are going to grow young learners to be resilient and to not be upset if something doesn't work, but to engage and say, what happened there? Why didn't that work? Let's take a look at that and really emulate that positive attitude to them and say, I know, let's think about what can we do to improve this and try again and help children to understand that's really part of the journey. It truly is part of the STEM and STEAM process. It's not always going to work on the first time, and that's really making them more resilient and better prepared for life, right? To keep going when things don't work out. And if they're making something original, it makes a lot of sense that it's not always going to work the first time. They've got to kind of refine their design and their idea. So here's a framework put into action. So most STEAM and STEM activities do have an objective. Um, this one is to design and construct a toy box with a lid that holds a small toy. The challenge. So this, you will define some of your own STEAM and STEM activities. I would encourage you to kind of start slowly and just say something like it needs to stand up or to float, or you must use at least four different, and here's, even that you're bringing in math. You must use at least four different materials and you can have your poster up of what is a material. Oh, wood, paper, glue, I don't know what else. So you let them know and they're counting how many. This challenge is the toy box must have a square or rectangle shape. It can only hold one toy and its lid must be different colors. So see how, that's very simple and it's really doable for you to make up those challenge rules that the lid has to have different colors. It's something children can relate to, they can understand, and it's achievable. And then there's materials. You'll be providing the materials for your activities. Now we're looking at the STEM process. This is the STEM process in action. So ask, what shape is your toy? So you're looking at some physical science there. How many sides does a box have? There's some math and engineering. Plan, look at the materials in the plan box on the next page. Draw a picture of the toy box you will build with the materials. So drawing is huge in the planning process for early learners. This is really the main thing that early learners are doing to plan. If you have kids that are still in pre-writing, you can help them out by writing their plan for them underneath their picture. But really, drawing is what most of the early learners are doing to plan their activities, and it helps guide them through how they're going to build something. All right. So using centers and stories for STEM and STEAM experiences. So centers are a great way to bring STEAM and STEM into your classroom. So here's an example. Too much sun. The sun is too hot on my skin. What can I do? This is a problem that you can post at a center. You're just going to set up the drawing center, provide students with a picture that shows a problem, and they're going to draw how they'll fix the problem. These are centers you can set up in your classroom and students can do independently. You can just make your own picture and your own problem. I would suggest you're doing something that is in their world, something they can relate to, so that you're building their confidence that they're able to come up with a solution. Problem solving building center. This is where you're going to put out all your materials for them to build something. So this particular problem I came up with is not enough food. It's winter and the birds need more food. Build a tall bird feeder that the birds can land on and make a place to put birdseed. So you're going to set up the building center. Lots of different materials is important, but again, they can just be whatever you have. So paper towel tubes, popsicle sticks, pencils, if you're comfortable with it, paper clips. It can be all the materials, string, paper plates that you already have. Again, empathy is the motivator here. That is what helps children create a functional design. A colors and cooperation center. So hands-on physical science and creativity really empowers students to believe that they're creators. And the very youngest students, you can use this color mixing guide. This is where they're really going to see magical differences happening right in front of them because they're going to mix colors to make a new color. Just like how they take building materials and use them to make something that did not exist. So this is empowering them and giving them confidence to help them know that they can solve real world problems. So something as simple as putting out paper plates with different colors and giving them a mixing guide to follow. It's okay if you give them a little structure and that they're going to follow the mixing guide. Oh, this is a fun one. A paper bag creativity center. This is where you set up centers in your classroom and you just fill them with all different things. And each student takes a bag and they just build whatever they want. So this is something that you can't go wrong with. And it really helps them with that creativity piece become more and more comfortable. So you might start with creativity bag centers to kick off STEAM or STEM in your classroom, and then progress to activities that have more structure. Using stories for STEM and STEAM experiences. So just any trade book that you have, in any book that you have, you can build a STEAM and STEM experience, whatever you already have in your classroom. This story happens to be a really good fit for STEM and STEAM because it's about a boy that wants to change his house and he lets his mom know that he's going to redesign all the rooms in his house. Um, but after you read this story, some of the STEM and STEAM activities that you can pull from it are, draw a picture of one thing you'd like to add to the rooms that Jack, the little boy in the story, already designed. Add one more room to Jack's house. Draw a picture of what that room would look like. So right there, they're designing, and that's pulling in a couple different technologies in engineering as well. Which room in Jack's house do you think will work and why? So you're having them do some analytical thinking there and looking at Jack's designs to see why they think it will or will not work. Use a shoebox, sorry. Not a show box, sorry, that's my typo. Use a shoebox to build one of the rooms in Jack's house. So now they're going to make a model. Another story that you can use and some questions. This story is about two boys who want to win a snowman contest. Um, Asking questions that help them reflect on the story, but lead them to have design thinking. What happened when the boys were working on their own? How did that change when they worked together? What tools did they use? These are all just already in your classroom questions that you can come up with. If you're doing the weather calendar in your room, you can encourage design thinking and use graphic organizers to do it. Asking questions, why do you think it's windy? It's really helping fuel that inquiry-based thinking. What happens when raindrops fall to the ground, right? So you're asking them. They can kind of work through some of that. Using journals together to foster design thinking every day. So just providing a simple format. This is something actionable that your students you can assemble the journal pages together and make it into a book. As children look through what they drew, the idea they had, the question they had, one thing they made, it really gives them confidence and it's really becomes a source of pride for them for all the things that they made and any questions they had. It leads to deeper thinking. When you send that home and engage their families in what they're doing, it really helps continue that conversation. And again, building confidence to interact with their parents and talk about their ideas. This kind of gives you that platform for children to be able to do that.
Just a heads up. Okay, so we are already done. Okay, I just wanted to give a heads up that we would extend the session for maybe 5 more minutes because as we have another session planned at 7:30. Okay.
We are done. Thank you so much. Don't forget your freebies. You can download them from the Glow dashboard. And does anyone have any questions that I can answer? I hope I answered some of your questions in this session.
So yes, definitely. I think there was a question about how we can engage children who are not interested maybe in STEM or STEAM activities. Maybe with these corners and the strategies you shared, they will be interested. Other than that, there was a question about how teachers can feel confident who are not from a strong background in STEM or STEAM. So maybe we can address this one.
Sure. Yeah. Um, so I guess to just think about if you look at the design process and maybe something that I have in the charts here on some of my first slides can help you. So design thinking, if you can become familiar with design thinking, this will help you have insights into how design thinking you can kind of pull out those strings of the lessons that you're already doing. So if you're doing something in math, can you take that same concept and relate it maybe to the mystery bag? Is there something in there that you can do for children too? So if you think about I guess, the possibilities of design thinking in your curriculum already, or whatever you're doing in science. Think about if I'm doing this in science, is there any math piece here? Because that's really all you're doing. If you're doing something with art, what is that piece? What is the creation for? You can come up with a problem that they're going to find a solution for. So you can look at your science curriculum, and instead of just teaching about, I don't know, why animals have fur, okay, and sharing that with your students, why that body part is important to animals, what you can do is ask, what do you think would happen if animals did not have fur? What do you think would happen? Let's talk about that. So, and then if the bear was not going to grow fur, what can we design to help that bear? So, you really can kind of flip your curriculum a little bit to look at it to see where can you find problems that they can have solutions for, and that's how you're going to end up teaching that curriculum. Now, for my freebies, I am from Evan Moore, and we do have STEM and STEAM materials. And I have to let you know that they do have everything already done for you. But I'm hoping that as you use the units, those will really help give you more ideas for creating your own curriculum. You do not have to buy a book to bring STEM and STEAM into your classroom. However, there are many materials that can help you along and make it easier. And I've shared materials where we have design thinking built in. We have challenges and stories and science and math concepts and engineering, already built in. So full units that you can use to bring into your classroom. And hopefully that will help you learn more about STEM and STEAM and kind of kickstart the activities in your classroom.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We have a lot of questions, though we are short on time, and they're on the similar theme. So maybe you can all mail your questions to us, and we will definitely answer your questions. Other than that, about the certificate and freebies, you have to go to Glow dashboard and download your certificates and freebies. That's the process. A huge thank you to Lisa for showing us how to create classroom buzzing with curiosity and resilient problem solvers. And thank you for an amazing participation from our participants. Your vibrant energy and thoughtful questions definitely made this session even more better. So definitely don't miss these STEM freebies. Download them from Glow Dashboard. And lastly, I would like to also mention that our next session is going to start at 7:30 p.m., where Christina will present Unlocking the Power of Number Sense, Building Confident and Flexible Young Mathematicians. So do join that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you so much.